Welcome to the podcast. This is Eric Salzman, joined by Richie Bennett and Kevin Doherty. What's up, fellas?
Hello, hello.
Hey, hey guys.
So let's start with the one bit of maybe good news from this whole debacle in the Gulf is Kevin's going to it's something that we actually predicted, I think, a couple of weeks ago when we thought that the Iranians were going to charge a toll on going through the strait and really how they were going to do that. And Kevin, take it away.
Yeah, so they're charging people you can pay in Bitcoin or Chinese yuan, and it's interesting. It also kind of there's a bigger issue that Iran for years has done, and Iranian businesses have done their banking through Dubai primarily, but other Oman a little bit, and it appears they've been cut off from those channels, and so how are they going to get paid? And crypto is obviously an easy way to do that. There, Iran has some history with Bitcoin. There are some Bitcoin mining operations that have been active in Iran over the years, and Iran has used Bitcoin to pay for stuff from like China. So it's not completely new that they're using Bitcoin, but this could be in big amounts if they're actually able to successfully implement these charges. And Donald stands by and lets this happen. I'm kind of skeptical that that's going to happen, but we'll see how that unfolds. But
Could
yeah,
they
it's
could they use Trump's stablecoin?
Maybe that'll be part of the deal.
That's the first thing I thought of.
Yeah, I mean, but politically, it's look, the crypto community has really been trying to get away from the stigma that was attached to it for years, and for good reason, that it was used for nefarious purposes, and that they mostly left that behind. Obviously, there's still problems with North Korean hackers that go in and steal crypto, steal Bitcoin, and use it for their purposes. But it's not a great look for hey, here's the use case for Bitcoin. It's for Iran to charge basically blackmail on oil shipments that go through the Straits of Hormuz.
And I
So
think we talked too about what kind of rate it might be. And I'm hearing numbers like the US dollar equivalent of
dollar per
a
barrel,
buck to two
or
bucks per
yeah,
barrel, right?
yeah.
Which should be like close today if you took it today's numbers, and they'll probably raise it if the price goes up. But that's like 1 to 2%. That's a
You
nice.
Yeah.
remember you remember we were kids back in the day when you'd go over a toll, you go over a bridge. Remember, and your dad would throw he'd throw the coins into the thing, and
Yeah.
every now and then somebody would throw the coin and it would bounce off the bat, and they'd have to get out of the car, and it's the big backup. Like, can't you see that happening now? And like everybody's got to. I mean, I know you're not stopping and paying a toll, like per se, but still,
Yeah.
don't they have to count how many barrels are on the, are
Yeah.
like, do they do it one by one on a super tanker, or do they just make an assumption that I'm
I
It's
just
think too
it's
those some of those tankers have some serious like horns to alert everybody they're coming. So
right?
that could be like gridlock at the Hormuz.
That's what I'm thinking.
Move your ass. Come on.
It's like when you're trying to go over the bridge to get to the Yankee game back in
Yeah.
the 70s.
And we used to do the old if there wasn't a gate, we would let the passenger side rider
Yeah.
take the quarter or whatever and do a hook shot. And if you missed, somebody would pick it up. Whatever, just go.
Yeah, I
And if
think
you,
my dad used
or
to.
the other ones were the down to on the Jersey Turnpike, the Garden State Parkway.
Yep.
I think they've taken those all out now. But we used to not slow down. That was a good one too. Like I throw the money as we're coming to the toll and see if it makes it.
living on the edge.
I
Crazy
think my
kids.
dad. I think
It's
my
also,
dad
I
used
mean,
to.
it could be a big honeypot too. They're going to be collecting this amount of Bitcoin, and but I mean, that there are going to be people that they better have good wallet security on that, because I mean, even look, the CIA and other agencies, why not go in and try and hack that anonymously, of course. And yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds.
What don't they have great? Don't they have great cyber capabilities though? I always thought that
Yes,
was.
yeah,
Okay, I'm really surprised that hasn't hit yet.
that which part?
The like Iranians firing back at us with a bunch of cyber shit stuff.
Yeah, maybe they're not as good as the the U.S. seems to have the best. Maybe the Chinese could threaten them. I've got actually an interesting story. With the Russia-Ukraine war, when that started, one thing that people were surprised about is that the Russians were not able to shut down the Ukrainian power network and other things as was expected. And it turns out, I mean, I know some people in the cybersecurity industry. They basically prepared for that. The U.S. sent in like the equivalent of the SEAL Team 6 of cyber warfare into Ukraine in the weeks and months before the invasion to basically prepare for all this. And so when the Russians did try and implement all their cyber attacks, but they were stopped
Hmm.
by the so we're living through crazy times, and yeah,
You realize I got the picture when you said SEAL Team Six of like Sam Altman, Bill Gates, like a bunch- Richie, you remember that I think you remember the Goldman Christmas party meme? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah. They had a picture of all those guys as youngsters.
skinny guys with big glasses and stuff. Like that's
Our future leaders.
sitting around a card table with
Yeah.
a little personal computer. Oh man. Yeah, yeah, this is crazy. And Rich, you and I were texting back and forth a little bit yesterday. This is more of a history discussion than a finance, but I guess it all. I was watching I get all these reels on Facebook, which is great. That's why I love Facebook now, just because I get all these interesting things. I love about World War II, so I always get these clips, and a lot of it are veterans talking about. And there's very few left, but this one veteran who was a in the Marine Corps, and he did a number of the island campaigns. And what he said was he was talking about late 1943, I think that was Tarawa, and then the two major battles kind of in the middle of 1944 were Peleliu and Saipan. And what he basically said, I think he was at Saipan, and he said that at that point the Japanese knew they weren't going to win anymore. Like their goal of taking over the entire basically the whole Pacific Basin was gone. So now it was all about getting us to maybe fight to a standstill, and they could keep a lot of what they had. And they knew at that time that now they realized just they were going up against the machine, and we were putting out carriers. We were just cranking out stuff. I think we had the biggest navy by that point, the largest navy than all the rest of the navies of the world combined. So they knew, and the only thing they can count on was did we have the resolve to take horrendous losses? Like and that no more bonsai charges and stuff. They would just fortify. They knew the islands that we had in mind that that they were coming for, and they spent a year just digging in and tunnels and caves and all kinds of intricate systems that fire systems that everything was basically targeted, and it was going to be a disaster. And they knew that none of them were leaving that island, but they wanted to put horrific casualties on us to make it happen. And what the guy said is, he said, well, they underestimated us. They didn't realize that, yeah, we're going to do whatever it takes to win, and if we have to kill every one of you, which we did, essentially, we're going to do that. And that was the plan. And I feel like with the Iranians, it's kind of the same thing, where I mean, they must have been planning for decades of how to close the strait down. This is their main. This is going to be their main leverage. You really don't need a nuclear weapon. You just need to shut the strait down, and how we could do it effectively forever. But they weren't going to do it like when we started slapping the sanctions on them and doing lots of stuff. Even after the bombing in June, we blew up their nuclear their enrichment facilities. They knew that if they did that, then they'd be viewed as like Saddam going into Kuwait, and the world would rally around to get them to do something. But they were attacked, right? And now they've implemented that plan and they clearly have huge leverage now. And it feels like because they were attacked first, like I don't, it seems like a lot of the world feels like almost they're on the moral high ground. Like
Hmm.
it's okay. Like if they had done this without real provocation, I think Europe, everybody would be lining up for like a coalition like that was that was the first Gulf War. But this, it's kind of like, they this was their nuclear option and they've done it. And now the only way that you're really going to get them out of there is to send in, basically no more bombing, no, like just like with these Japanese island campaigns. We bomb that we have battleships blasting away for an entire day, constant sorties of fighter planes strafing and bombing and everything. And then we get to the island and we basically didn't kill anybody. Like they were all still there.
Hmm.
Um, so and this time we definitely don't have the resolve to see huge casualties because that to me that's the only way you do this is you have to send men in there to clear all this out and I don't know how we do that. And I kind of hope we don't do that.
Yeah. I mean, more good news though. Um, Stocks, U.S. equities are now 7 or 8 day winning
Eight.
streaks.
Today's eight.
Yeah. So, and again, we always talk about this, but stock market's usually a gauge for 6 to 9 months out. So, what that's telling me, if we believe that, is in 6 to 9 months, right? You got an election coming up. So, something's going to break or not. But it's certainly trading like, oil prices are going to come down, inflation is going to come down, the Fed is going to somehow ease or something. And that's how it's trading today. Obviously, that can change in a minute. But, so far, stocks are trading as if good things are going to come out of this somehow, some way that benefit the U.S. anyway.
Right.
I don't think, I mean, they said, what was it? Norway's stock market has done the best since the war because their biggest producers of oil
Well, all right.
are on their exchange. So it's up like 30% since the war started. Everything else is kind of flat or down. I mean, before this 8 day winning streak, stocks were lower, right, than year to date. But now it seems to be coming back. I don't, who knows? But it is interesting that it's trading like that. And most people, I think, when they hear ceasefire with all the parties involved, I think everybody was like, it wasn't like great. The market traded like it was great news. This is great news.
Right.
And any person, that I chat with or whatever, they're like, yeah, let's wait, dude. Like look at all the characters that are in this. It's like 2 weeks. Okay, what happens in 2 weeks?
What happened in 24 hours?
Right.
Like, well,
So I don't see that. I think it's going to go longer than 2 weeks. And does that take a toll? And the at some point, right? They have the core CPI and the core PPI, which you know one measure excludes food and energy, which I always laughed at. I was like, doesn't everybody need food and energy? Like, why do we exclude that? Because that can be volatile, right? But at some point, that stuff all seeps in, right? Like
sure.
if if we got oil at 100 and something bucks and it stays like that, there's going to be problems not just for you know people driving cars. Everything gets affected, right?
Sure.
Supply chains, everything. So that can't.
And that seems like that's baked in for the summer, right? The oil prices aren't coming down unless there is just ultimate peace deal announced. Everyone, all sides agree. It just seems oil's not going to come down that much. And summer driving season and flying season is already on us.
Yeah, the airlines' new game, right? All the U.S. airlines are bumping their baggage fees. That's how they used to just charge more on the airfare, right? A gas tax or whatever. Now it's, yeah, hit them over the head some more on the bag they want to check.
Now, I heard an interesting theory of why they do that. It's because when energy comes back down eventually, it wasn't an energy surcharge. It's a baggage
Right.
surcharge. I don't have to lower it.
This is what we charge for our bags. Yeah.
We just move the floor up to the, oh my God. Yeah, it's, I don't know. I don't know if we've ever experienced this before. And again, it's like we talked about, is this like a 1979 event, like Iranian Revolution? Oil explodes higher. We have an energy crisis, but it's relatively short term. Things work themselves out. Everybody starts over producing, and next thing you know, you have an oil glut, and eventually it works itself out. Or is it 73 where it's like, okay, now, there's a new regime, and the new regime is OPEC, and they've significantly increased the floor of where oil is going to trade forever. And the question is, with them in the straight, is this more of a 1973 thing? And then, well, okay, then you basically have to increase the base price of almost everything based on this new regime. One thing that I read, I was kind of shocked that, and someday someone has to get on here and explain exactly how this all works. But I read that California imports 75% of its gasoline and derivatives of crude, and they get it from South Korea. Now, I didn't even know that South Korea had oil to be. I thought they had the biggest problem because they are totally dependent on imports for oil. But I guess they've got refineries over there, and and their main customers is the West Coast of the United States. So
Hmm.
someday someone has to come on and really explain to us all the different grades and why this one uses that and why the United States has to import so much oil still when me, the man on the street, goes, don't we have a lot of oil? And I guess we do, but not all of it is used for the things that we want to use it for. I don't.
We're the biggest exporter now, right?
Yeah. So we're exporting oil and I guess it's how your refineries are set up, right? I mean that they're set up to handle a certain grade or something like that. And obviously the best grade is what comes from the Middle East, I guess.
Yeah, I read an article on this whole thing talking about good news and what could move the markets even higher. Like if and I get the theory, it's like you know the number that gets thrown around is like the regime in Iran has 20% approval rating, right, within the country. So people sit around and hear that number and they're like, how the hell can like I understand like nobody can have guns except for the leaders, but how the hell can 80% of a country? I mean, it's like 100 million people, right? 90 million, something like that. There's a lot of people. And nobody can say, all right, listen, this is crap. We're all, because of these guys that we don't like, we're getting put in this ringer, and now it's time to go. So the theory that I've seen is somebody does emerge from the 80% crowd that plays some ball. In other words, all right, these guys were off their rockers. We're not going to be that. We're not completely friendly with you guys, but we can make some sort of peace and get everything flowing. And oh, by the way, if we do this, Don, you owe us some money because you wrecked everything. And you could see somebody doing that, right? Writing a check if it's favorable. So I don't know if that's catching some wind and tailwinds for that regime thing to happen. I don't know. It just they kept that guy quiet now. The Shah's son, right? He was all loud in the beginning, and I think they told him tone it down there, Johnny. You're not the guy, right? Like maybe he was angling to
Right.
to be the new leader, and they're like,
Yeah.
no, your old man was part of this problem, so you can't come back and run it. But if you know people, maybe you have suggestions. It could happen. But I find it funny that not funny, but there's something to this market, stocks rolling like this in this
Mhm.
time. Like and again, like I said, it could fall out of bed tomorrow and
Well,
drop
they got it
stone.
wrong. You remember how wrong they got it in the subprime crisis, right? When we were all Rich and I were fixed income. And we used to joke around like this is now it's early 2007. Things are really starting to get ugly. And we used to say like we're watching two different like the bond market and the stock market are watching two different movies. Like we're watching they think they're watching a Disney classic and we're watching a slasher film.
Right.
Like they just don't get it. But and I have a feeling that they're missing this one. I like we said the other night when the peace when the truce was announced or the ceasefire, and we said yeah, like the bond market like bonds went up, stocks went up, and then bonds started going, like they started really hedging. And you've noticed that, right? Is that bonds have basically been almost flat since that ceasefire on Tuesday, and stocks have keep reacting as though like it's going to be over in a few months. It's going to be relatively quick. So again, the bond market seems to know,
Yeah. I remember like waking up in the middle of the night, one of those nights in like '07, '08. And I was trying to figure out how to explain it, right? Because we were having our frequent guest appearances on the strategy room and the like, the Fox strategy room, which was the internet show before it was in vogue, right? It was a show that you could stream on your computer in 2007, which was pretty cool. Um, but the way I got it, I woke up and I wrote it down. I was like, this will do it. So it was pick the numbers. I don't know. The Dow was at like 10,000, right? And I said, there's no index. And luckily, I said it on the air. I remember. I said, there's no index for bonds, really. I mean, there are. People look at, certain ETFs. We're still around then. We're around then. But my point was like the bond market right now, if the Dow's at 10,000, the bond market's index is 5,000, and you want to short it. Like that's where we're going. And that happened. That was a prescient call. But yeah, I think it's always the bond market that I look at.
And
not just because we were part of that business, but
do you remember when that was?
it was like
roughly?
'07, late, like
Okay.
'08. Because what was happening was like people were not believing the real estate thing. And right. And that was around the time like real estate is local came out.
Mhm.
Right? Like that, the only local markets. It never goes down everywhere. And that was a bad comment. Who said that? Bernanke?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was completely wrong. And yeah, you could just feel it when these guys were like in '05 and '06, like getting these homes. They were like cab drivers.
Rich, you remember we went on a show. Remember the show that the bar Fox had that show and
Yeah,
the
yeah, that was great.
Cody or something,
Happy hour or whatever.
happy hour, and Richie and I are sitting there and we're on the air. Actually, this was live on the air, and Cody, I don't know if I said it or Richie said it. He goes, guys, this is like either January '08 or late 2007. I think it was like December 2007. And he said, it's not that. He goes, is it really that bad? And I'm like, no, it's worse. Like you haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah.
Well, what was interesting is that the through the first half of 2008, the commodities market was going bananas
Yeah.
on the back of, the China growth story. And, I vividly remember oil was at 150 bucks in May '08, and iron ore and everything else was copper was just, all-time highs. While, so even more oblivious to the impending storm than equities were.
Right.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
mean, it as is the case always with the equities, you know, yes, it projects 6 to 9 months out, but everybody's like, what have you done for me lately? So every earnings season, which is coming now, right? The banks report this next week, I guess. So now we'll start to see, how companies are doing or did in March, right? When the bombs started falling. And is this impacting? And are they going to keep talking about inflation? And, has everything been impacted by higher oil prices for longer? And then you'll see, and this is not a good time historically. The midterm of a president's reign, if you will, summertime, right? Summertime is usually bad for stocks. So compound that with the midterm elections, which nobody really has a lot of perfect insight into. Like usually the party and the incumbent party loses,
Mhm.
right? So I don't know why this would be any different, but we'll see. And if it's uncertainty in July, August, September, that's when you get your real cracks in the
Yes.
old fabric.
So switching gears a little bit, it's get to know your banker month here in Monkey Business. And last week, if you remember, we talked about the fact that America's banker, Jamie Dimon, how JP Morgan Chase had a program where they were giving, we talked about this last week, giving debit cards to basically to convicts. They made a deal with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and when a convict was released and his sentence was up, they used to give you like a new suit or something and some cash to get a bus ticket and get somewhere, get to your halfway house. And JP Morgan was able to get a no bid contract where you now that convict got the a debit card, and a debit card that was full of fees, a card that he could only use really use without getting killed. It was at a JP Morgan ATM. If he even went into JP Morgan and tried to take out, $7, because as you know, ATMs, I think the minimum is $10. They would charge him for that. Even if he went to a JPM branch with the JPM debit card, you get charged. And then we went into how they also got juries. So jurors, I guess, get a per diem that if they get sequestered, and they got the same. They got a very similar debit card from J.P. Morgan, and we talked about how something like that just doesn't, that doesn't happen with a bunch of AV associate vice presidents and branch managers. That comes from the top. And yeah, and I think it's funny. We're going to write this one up, but there could have been a time when the juror of a person that is being now found guilty and being sentenced, the juror and the criminal could have both been could have both been victims of the same scam at the same time. They probably ran a model or something to see correlations and stuff. So here's one that's just like I've been looking at this for a while, and it really started with because my mom, I put her into like CDs when rates started going up in like 2022, and I said, oh, let's.
Was she a juror or a convict in this story?
Juror.
Okay.
So I put her into a CD and it paid a nice rate. I think back then we were getting almost 4%. And I think it got up to 5. And when I went to roll the CD, I was told that, well, they were giving me a terrible rate. Like, wait, hold on. Like, why are you giving me like 1% when the market's at 5%? And I'm coming out of like a near 5%. They said, oh, that's only introductory. And I go, oh, explain that to me. And literally, it was a credit union, and the person, very nice person, had no idea what she was really telling me. Is she said, "Oh, well, what it is a new customer gets the introductory rate, but then when it's time, it'll roll into the rate that you see for your mom here, like at 1%. It's a very low rate." And I said, well, why is that? And she basically, oh, it happens all the time, and people don't know about it. And then the next thing they know is we get it. Now they're getting 1% on their money for the next 6 months. And then they call us up and yell at us and stuff like that. And I'm like, so this is a policy? Like, okay. So I started watching this, and it's going on today. So if you notice, guys, if you notice that it's weird, right? That when you see ads on the internet, it used to be in the paper, right? They'd say, "Oh, special introductory rate," and it'll be a 4-month CD or a 7-month or an 11-month, and you're like, "Why are these off crazy months? Like, who even looks at an 11-month? It's weird." And they all do it, including America's banker, JPM, and you realize that it's one of these negative consent plays where the person gets the introductory rate. The fine print does tell you that, hey, this 7-month is going to roll into a 6-month at a potentially significantly lower rate. But I think you have like 5 days to before this thing rolls to notify the bank that you want your money out or I want a better rate somewhere. And if you don't do that, it's viewed as if you're silent to it, it's viewed as consent. So they roll you into and now it's like they'll pay like 7 month, they'll pay 3.5%. But if you screw up, you get rolled into a 6% 7 months from now at 5 basis points. 0.05 is what you get. So, and this now apparently it's not illegal because it is in the fine print, but it is definitely super tricky and nasty. And you just can you just see guys again, very senior people now, all these banks sitting in a room and coming up with this. Like, yes, this is it. This is how, and you realize this is how these guys, this is where the real money is made. Trading, derivatives, all that, whatever. It goes up, it goes down. This doesn't go up. This is constant, constant.
And this is a big reason why I'm skeptical that uh, the Clarity Act is going to pass in the U.S. That which would basically bring decentralized finance into under regulated, accepted, widespread use because the banks want to defend their net interest margin at all cost. And so
Mhm.
they are saying, no, these stable coins can't pay interest because if they do, it's going to erode our deposit base and we can't let that happen. And so there's been a lot of positive commentary in the last few weeks from the White House and even from different senators saying we're really close. We're coming to a deal on clarity. The bankers are almost there. I just don't think it's going to happen for
Mhm.
this exact reason because it's just this is it, man. This is the core bread and butter.
Yeah, this is billions and billions of dollars. This is, and I mean for each of them, because that's what you're a bank, right? So banks generally hold not a lot of capital relatively, and they're very leveraged. They borrow money, whether they're borrowing money wholesale or in this case borrowing money retail. This is how the game is played, and this is huge.
So not to get too wonky, but I'll tell a similar story about the America's Bankers, JPM, where I was employed as a first job. At the time, we had the biggest swap desk in the world, derivatives.
Interest
They,
rate swaps.
yes, they basically JP and I think Bankers Trust, if I'm not mistaken, kind of
Understood.
founded, yeah, kind of founded the interest rate swap market back in like the late 80s, mid to late 80s. And basically, what a swap does is, for those who don't know, it's usually a fixed versus floating payment. And at its core, it's really good because it allows, in the beginning, it was corporations that used it to tap the markets for borrowing. And then if they didn't like the fixed rate, they could swap it for a floating rate if they were making that bet that rates were going to stay lower and that floating rate was generally much lower than the fixed rate, or at least somewhat lower. And if they wanted to make that play, they could. And it was called asset and liability management, ALM, right? That was a big thing. So we were all at some muckety muck conference, internal conference, like where everybody talks about how great they are. And these guys, I won't mention their names, get up and they're talking about the swap desk. I was part of a structured note desk, which was a little different, but we used the swaps to create the derivative notes. And the swap desk guys came out and said, when you pay fixed, it's usually a semi-annual fixed rate payment, whatever the fixed rate is, you pay on the swap, and you receive. If you're paying fixed, you receive floating, and back then it was LIBOR, the London Interbank Offered Rate, which has gone through a change now. Now it's SOFR, but that doesn't really matter in this case. And LIBOR was usually paid on what they'd call an actual over 360-day basis, meaning if you kept that trade on for a year, you would pay 365 days of that interest on that floating rate note. Okay. So to go back to your comment, Eric, about billions and billions. So JP Morgan at that time was doing billions and billions of swaps, billions and billions. So this guy comes out and says, and if if you want, you can try to push the 30 over 360 day formula. And people say, what's that? Well, then you only have to pay out the interest to the client of 360 days, not the actual, which we know is 365 days. So you save on 5 days of interest for the house to not pay the client. And they bragged about how like 80% of the time it works. And then if the client comes back and catches them, they're like, "Oh yeah, we messed that up. Sorry." Like that was said. That was like said in this conference. Like I was like, "Oh my God." I was like 22 years old, 23 years old. I'm like, "This is how they make dough?" Like this is like Earl Shine painting your car for $99. Like back in the day. Like I was like, "You got to be kidding me." But that was the deal. That was back then. That was like these wonderful new ways of making money have probably gotten even better. Like more disguised. But it's like, really? Like that's what you say? Yeah, you'd be surprised how they didn't catch it. Like this is your client, dude. Like you're doing multiple trades with these guys, and this is how you treat them. Like let's see if we can scam them for 5 days. Now on $1 billion, yeah, that's a nice scam. But it's like, and then the whole like, oh, whoa, oh, we didn't know. Sorry, yeah, you're right. We owe you that extra money. You're right. Sorry.
They yell at the ops group. It's the operations
Yeah.
guy's fault.
Come on, guys.
Well,
Clean it up back there.
that's the. If I think we talked about this, or you remember the Wells Fargo when they got busted for it was when they for corporations when they do a lot like multinational corporations they do a lot of foreign currency, so they may have euros and everything needs to get swapped back into dollars. So the custodian in this case, this is Wells. What they would handle all of your foreign currency transactions. It was a service, and literally they would call it the big figure trick. And the big figure trick was like, okay, let's say it's Canadian dollars. Right now, Canadian dollars are, $1.32. So $1 buys $1.32. Well, what they would do, depending on which way they were going, is instead of 132, they transpose it to 123. They do it in their favor. So you just keep it absolute. So 132 to 123, which was huge. And most of the time, because this was being done, most of the people in the back office people in the corporation didn't know what, one from the other. And it would go, and if it went bad, you go, oh my God, oh, Mary input the ticket wrong. I'm sorry. We'll fix that. And I mean, like this is the kind of stuff that they do. And I guarantee if we looked at all of it, this is where the real money's being made. This is the license to that federal banking charter. This is what it's for. It's not it's not to go out and do derivatives. And Richie, to your point, like back then, I mean, interest rate swaps are now we call it a vanilla product. It's a commodity. And the margins are generally very, very small. Back then, they were doing the business clean. You were making $1 zillion, right?
It was the perfect example of like, you guys really have to do this to make more money than you're already making. Because not to go crazy on this interest rate swap business, but back in the day, if you and I did a swap, right, you needed to know, and I needed to know that you were going to be around for this swap to make the payments, right? I've hedged this thing, counting on Eric and counting on Kevin to make payments, and I'm going to make payments to them. So your credit rating as an institution was enormous. Now they've figured out ways to collateralize them, and your credit rating doesn't matter as much. JP Morgan was like the only AAA bank there was. Like AIG Financial Products got started because they had a AAA rating, and they went after JP Morgan's business because if it was a long-term swap, 10 years, 20 years, like most of these corporations had written into their, bylaws or whatever, their investment, proceedings to only deal with somebody who's AA plus rated or AAA, the highest rating. So they'd come in to JP on a long, 10-year, 20-year swap. And JP knew there was nowhere else they could possibly be going. Nowhere else. Like none. Like we got these guys. And, it'd be like huge, huge numbers, like 100 million, 200 million back then. And they could just print whatever they wanted. Yeah, Well, hold on. That seems a little expensive. Yeah. Okay. Basically, like, all right, do it away. Go
Right,
find one of our competitors. And they couldn't or wouldn't.
right.
So to pile on with this crap, it was like, come on, dude, really? Like you can make so much money regular, like just doing your business. You got to do this. Just cracks me up.
Yeah, then there's I was looking at some of the past transgressions where you remember the payment reordering in your account. So if to trigger overdraft fees, where
Yeah.
it's like, let's say you got $100 in your account and you did like $20, $20, $20, and then you went 120, right? So now you get the overdraft on that 120. And what the banks would do, and JP paid, I think, $110 million fine back in 2012 as being one of the main doers of this strategy. What they would do is, remember, you got $100 in your account. And what they would say, well, it was really important for us to, because that was the guy's rent check or something like that. So we did that one first. We reordered it and we honored that one first. So the 120, boom, now you're minus 20. And now the next three. So now I get to nail you for a $35 overdraft charge on three as opposed to one. Like, again, like people sat in a room and figured this shit out and said, yes, this is how we're going to do business. And it's
But
like,
those guys probably got promoted. The guy
sure.
who came up
Oh,
with that
yeah.
is the one who got the promotion. And so
The riskless business. The riskless business.
And it is riskless. I mean, so all right, so they paid 110 million. I'm sure Wells and everybody else had to pay money, but the amount of money they must have made off of that
Yeah.
is just tremendous. And again, that becomes the old, the Ford, do we recall all the cars or do we yeah, or do we just don't do that and eventually someone's going to sue us because enough people are going to get killed and then with them the lawsuit at the end of the day will be a lot cheaper than having to recall all these cars. It's like the same thing. Like eventually we're gonna get caught, but by the time they do it, like this, they probably even have like a break even.
Yeah.
We can do this for 3.5 years before they catch on, and then it'll take another 3 years for them to get the money from us. Like we'll make this much.
Funny shit.
All right. Well,
So, more good news. Um, the old Yukon Huskies in the basketball. Let's go to the sports arena. They actually, we went 2-1 last week. We had Arizona who lost to Michigan, but we picked Yukon against Duke, which was a crazy game, buzzer beater. And then we had Yukon against the spread on Monday night, and the spread was magically 7, and they lost by 6. So that's a winner. So we're very happy. There was a guy named you probably remember him. Some of you old timers will definitely remember him. It's a guy named Bert Sugar who used to do the boxing. He was a boxing analyst. He had a nice fedora always and a nice cigar always. My kind of guy. And he would go ringside. He'd always be at the big fights, 70s, 80s, probably 60s. Always be at the big fights. And he was prominent, like he knew his stuff. And he made a statement one time. He said, I've invested in a lot of things in my life: stocks, bonds, commodities. It was foreign currency. He goes, the best investment I ever made was Larry Holmes, because Larry Holmes was a boxer, some of you may remember, who was like right after, like he beat Ali. He used to be Ali's sparring partner. When Ali was really going down and shouldn't have been fighting, Holmes kind of came onto the scene and beat him, his old boss, basically. And Holmes never lost until he fought Mike Tyson when Tyson was like 21 and Holmes was like 40, just for one more big payday, and he got his ass kicked. But he won every other fight. So Bert Sugar would say, that's my best investment. And he wasn't favored by a lot. Like you weren't risking a lot to make a lot on Larry Holmes every time he came out. Every time. So the Yukon Huskies men's basketball team is kind of like that. They have won now against the spread, I think 19 in a row. from the
Wow.
Sweet 16 on. So as long as they can pass the first weekend, they cover every spread. So from now, and they're losing a bunch of guys this year, and I'm still going to bet them next year as long as they have that coach Hurley. So things are looking up there. We like that. But where I have to interject, starting on Sunday is the last regular season game of the NBA. Then the playoffs start. A lot of crazy stuff will happen in the playoffs, as always. Very exciting. The ratings are doing very well. They have a lot of good young players that people seem to like. Some of the big market teams like the Knicks and the Celtics and the Lakers are doing well. So people like to watch that. Um, but Phil Jackson, the former coach of the Chicago Bulls and Los Angeles Lakers, and a player for the Knicks the last time they won the championship in 73, um, had this theory, and it's a fabulous theory, and it's worked. I think it's only happened twice and it was due to injuries, big player injuries, since they expanded the playoff situation in the NBA to more teams in like 1984, something like that. So 40 plus years, right? No team, except for two, in these 40 plus years, has won the NBA championship without winning 40 games during the regular season before they lost 20. So they had to be 40 and 20 or better. Actually, 41 and 20, 41 and 19 or better. This year, the Celtics almost made it. The Celtics were 40 and 19 and lost. So they get erased from our little scene. Three teams: the Oklahoma City Thunder, the San Antonio Spurs, and the Detroit Pistons are the only three teams that won 40 games before they lost 20 in the NBA this season. So the recommendation here is, yes, you're going to lose on two of the bets, but the odds are pretty nice for each of those teams to win the whole thing. So the suggestion is to play a win of the NBA championship on Oklahoma City, a win on the NBA championship on San Antonio, and a win on the NBA championship on Detroit. And you won't be sorry because you'll have one winner. I think in that scenario, you want Detroit because they're the biggest odds, I think, to win it. But they have a really good shot to make the finals because they are the best team in the East. So San Antonio and Oklahoma City might really have a serious throwdown,
Right.
maybe get tired, what have you, and Detroit could sneak in. That's
So
our
if Oklahoma City
recommendation.
wins,
What?
so any team wins, it's just a magnitude of the payout. You're going to win no matter what, or
Yeah, if one of those three teams wins, you're going to get paid out. Oklahoma City's the favorite, so you won't get paid out that much, and you probably won't make a lot.
hmm,
But San Antonio and Detroit are nice odds. So you're basically betting investing three wagers to have one team be victorious amongst those three. But it's worked very well, and I'm doing that today by Sunday when this regular season ends. So we wanted to get that pick in before the playoffs start, which can change
so
things.
if your bank has scammed you and you're now stuck in a 0.05% rate for the next 12 months, this
Yep.
is how you're going to
Oh,
make up for it.
that's it. Roll it into the NBA.
So for all those cons and jurors out there, take your JP Morgan debit card
Yeah. Don't
down
don't mess
to
with buying bread. You know, go to your local bookie, sell them your card for a bet.
All right, guys, good stuff.
awesome.
And we'll see everybody next week.
Excellent.
See ya.